Hello, everyone. It is Wednesday, March 5th, 16:05 hours in the evening, Central Time. And we have some emergency breaking news. Quite an emergency alert. There is a new trade war that recently started with the US and Canada. We also have Europe going quite all in with the WW3 situation. So we'll get right into that, all that news. Things are escalating as expected. Once again, this is initially a live stream recording, and it is posted directly to the YouTube channel. So I actually have a lot of this today on my notes. Let me see here. We'll get into this light news. Recently, Texas turned. It's been 189 years since Texas declared its independence from Mexico with the adoption of the Texas Declaration of Independence. That was on March 2nd recently. So that's very interesting. 189 years ago, Texas became independent from Mexico. There's some history. I also actually went to Sam Houston, where he's buried. It was great going over there to that memorial. Went over there, took some pictures, and I went to the museum as well after that. They have a museum over there. That all of that is up in Huntsville, Texas. Then we have from the Insider paper earlier, China says it's ready for any type of war with the US. That's from the Insider paper and BBC News. I believe that's the British broadcast channel. So China is not showing really any weakness. They're intimidating all of their neighbors over there. They're doing those live fire drills. They're setting up their deployments around Taiwan, all their positioning to deploy into Taiwan. So that's a very tense situation, too. Now, let me get these notes out. So recently, the UK decided they are going to be putting thousands of troops and even some jets they're calling peacekeepers into Ukraine. The kinetic phase is extremely imminent. They are sending military units to Ukraine, so is France, Germany, under the guise of peace. Germany will be sending 100 Taurus missiles. They are long range, capable of reaching Moscow from Ukraine. France will be deploying a nuclear umbrella over Europe. They want to have French nuclear weapons throughout Europe, possibly replacing US positions. The US likely won't abandon NATO, though SHTF will follow very likely soon after. So we have major escalation with Europe and Ukraine. Europe is very nervous right now because of the President of the United States, Donald Trump. he is not, he's trying to stay out of the war in a big way, trying to get some kind of peace agreements going. Then it goes back to the minerals agreement. The minerals agreement is another pretty much cover for putting troops and Americans into Ukraine. Because with that, they could have contractors and troops put into Ukraine, and many of them will likely get attacked by Russia. Russia's not going to really be working around them. It's very likely they get caught in the crossfire or get into some kind of direct engagement with the Russians. So the World War III situation is continuing and escalating. There's not going to be peace as Trump seems to be pushing. It's one of the things the mainstream is trying to say. Things are just continuously escalating on the World War III front. Even if even if the US did abandon NATO, there's still alliances between countries. Great example is with Israel and Iran. We have alliances with Israel. The US has to support Israel in the wars in the Middle East. An even better example is with Taiwan. I don't believe they're a NATO country. There's just guarantees and alliances with Taiwan. If they're invaded, the US also has to get involved through alliance agreements that were done a long time ago. So we also have the trade war. The US and Canada are at some kind of trade war. I believe there's 25% tariffs going back and forth, especially with Canadian tariffs on US goods. 25%, I believe, is the number. The Northeast will be especially affected. Prices of food, gas, and in a big way, oil will skyrocket. It's going to get incredibly difficult with those all throughout the country, especially the Northeast. Places like parts of New York may be without power due to the power that flows into it from Canada. There's power plants, there's gas line, there's all different infrastructure. I know there's a power situation there that could seriously affect the Northeast. I believe when it comes to a nuclear power plant being connected, I'm not too familiar with the Canadian infrastructure and how it's connected to the US and the Northeast. It definitely is. It's been confirmed. There was a popular news. There was this guy in the news, I forget his name. He was saying how they have to tariff everything more and how he would like to continue to support the US, though he has to do this and that. It was very aggressive. The Canadians, they're not going to win a trade war at all with the US. Yeah, in the short term, the oil and the gas will be a large effect on the US. Not in the long term, though. And if things continue to escalate with that trade war, all the US has to do is stop giving security to Canada. They could stop with the nuclear radars up in Alaska. There's all different things that the US can do. They could leave Canada completely vulnerable to Russia and China if it comes down to that. So, say if there's like no power going to the Northeast, you could go as far as leaving Canada completely vulnerable to Russia and China. So, the Canadians are not going to win that trade war. It's not a. It's not going. It's unfortunate that it's happening. It could be resolved very simply by dropping tariffs. Each side, all they have to do is not tariff each other on any goods. And that's how it solves that problem. So hopefully something like that happens and the US doesn't have to make Canada extremely vulnerable, like pulling out all the troops from Canada and not even allowing them to have like any radar detection systems. Any reliance that Canada has with the US could be dropped militarily if the trade war gets that bad. Hopefully that does not happen. We'll see how that develops. Once again, we also have the nuclear forces. They are on the highest of alerts. There's been several emergency action messages today on the nuclear war frequencies. We also have some other news here. Let me see. The French president, Emmanuel Macron, had a national address. He said his stance on Russia and the future of the European security. He called Russia a threat. He declared Russia a direct threat to France and Europe. He also accused Moscow of violating the Minsk agreements signed in 2014. Let's see. He also claimed that Russia plans to mobilize 3 million soldiers and build 4,000 tanks by 2030. He also stated that peace will only return with a pacified Russia and not at the cost of Ukraine's capitulation. Then there's once again the potential deployment of European troops in Ukraine. He did not rule out sending European troops to Ukraine. There's also been announced a high-level military meeting next week with countries ready to guarantee future peace in Ukraine. So there's going to be a large military meeting that they're going to have, and they're going to talk about what they're going to do with Ukraine and how many and what troops likely that they'll be deploying into Ukraine. That's what it sounds like. Then there's France's nuclear doctrine. They initiated discussions on using French nuclear weapons to protect the entire EU. Also reaffirmed that France has the most powerful army in Europe. That's debatable. It's pretty close. Poland has a very powerful military. Poland might have a slight edge on France. It's very debatable. There will possibly be some upcoming talks with the Trump administration and Ukraine about the minerals deal and that whole situation. So we'll see what happens with any further future developments. Oh, then we have before I almost forgot. The Trump administration may start putting tariffs on Europe as well. It's going to cause, these tariffs are going to cause quite the relations issues with the Europe and Canada, to be sure. So keep on preparing. Things are escalating in a very big way. There's quite the separation with NATO and Europe. More accurately, the US, Europe, and Canada. So we'll see what further develops. Things are seriously escalating. I will be back soon with more likely emergency alerts and breaking news. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Love, light, and blessings to you all.